And despite that, despite knowing that these are the residents that vote for us to be in here, my council has made the hard but right decision. So sometimes in public service, it's more risky not to be forward thinking and take the calculated chance than it is to stay where it's comfortable. And at some point, it wasn't like a light going off, but it was kind of like the sun rising, where it kind of just said, it's time to give back to this community.
All right, today the Grindcast meets Southern Utah votes, your front row seat to real stories behind the candidates for mayor. So we're joined by Washington City Mayor Staheli, lifelong resident, Army National Guard veteran, businessman, and community builder. Since 2021, he's driven major growth, strengthened public safety, and set a bold vision for the city's future. So let's dive into it. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
It's good to be here.
So you are born and raised in Washington. I feel like that's just kind of a rare breed these days. So every once in a while, I'll meet somebody that's from here.
So homegrown to the fact where even when I graduated from Pineview High School in '93, there were around 3,000 to 4,000 residents. Today, Washington City is quickly approaching 40,000 residents. So over that 30-year span, you can see exponential growth. So to your point, it is becoming more and more rare.
Yes. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, being here for so long, and now we have so many people moving in that just love this place. What to you, what do you think makes this place special for those people that's attracting them to come in?
Yeah, I mean, there is a heritage, there is a culture, there is something special about this area. And what I found is most of the people moving to my community are those who are relatively like-minded, and they frankly want to weave themselves into the fabric of that culture. They like frankly, the conservative, family-oriented, traditional values, kind of those, freedom-loving people. And I would say in Washington, even more specifically, we have a uniqueness that we haven't lost the charm of some of just kind of our local community events. And so that's something that people want to be a part of. And sometimes, I've even talked to people who have just had a map up. I talked to a guy the other day. I was walking my dog and he had this map up, and him and his wife were retiring from Wisconsin or somewhere, and they just kind of kept narrowing down the circles. And it came to the point where Washington just met all of the topics on their list, and they're loving it. And so I always joke and say that we're not chasing growth, because growth brings us, complaints from many and its own set of problems. But since we've been discovered, we're doing our best to just maintain the unique quality community that we call home.
And how do you balance that growth from outsiders like just love this place and want to, but still respect the citizens that are here? Because there's some that are all for it, and then there's some that are like, no, we want it to stay as is. How do you balance?
So that's one thing that's really cool about having roots in my community, like literally farm roots, is that to a certain extent, I feel that I can bridge that gap of this period of 20 or 30 years where we've grown exponentially. And I don't know that it will be able to be done in perpetuity, but for right now, we're able to maintain that sense of identity, that sense of community, even really that pioneer heritage of being called to grow cotton in the desert on the banks of the Virgin River. And you have these groups of Southerners who gave up everything to settle in the Midwest and then trek west and then settle down here. So there is a resiliency and a pride that comes with this community that our story needs to continue to be told. And so I try to tell that and help people become part of it as they come here. But yeah, there's certainly challenges with roads and water and infrastructure. And I love that you talked about public safety, because that's also been a really high priority. But so just kind of maintaining balance within a community as we grow in sometimes an unbalanced manner.
Right. Yeah. Sometimes you're going to have more people moving in than expected.
Yes, and depending on where the development occurs and where the infrastructure is, it presents challenges.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. So one of the when we were doing some research, one of the biggest concerns that some people had was water, and kind of understanding what that was, and especially with some of the bigger developments come in. What are plans as far as to help solve some of those challenges because we've got to balance, the whether it be resorts or golf courses or whatever, but then also just the residents like, daily use, right? We want to give
Yeah,
them somewhere fun to go and play and that attracts and brings people in, but we want to make sure that you got hot water there.
right.
Yeah, because no one wants to be the mayor that shuts down the splash pads.
Oh, I know. Seriously, seriously. So, first of all, I just want to validate those concerns. The community is rightfully concerned. So let's put it into perspective for this year, and more specifically this water year, because
Yeah.
water years start on October 1st and go through September 30th. So we're finishing the 2024-2025 water year.
Oh.
And precipitation levels for this region, what they call the St. George region, is 3.31 inches. The lowest on record was 1971 to 1972, which was 3.18 inches. Average is about 7.82 inches.
Wow.
So we are having a very low precipitation year, which means that our soil is really dry, like that moisture content in the soil. So even if we do get some rain and some snow, first thing that's going to happen is that soil is going to kind of just soak that up.
Yeah.
And then because we rely on the snowpack, then to fill our reservoirs. So given that situation, we have to be very smart. So in addition to being the mayor, I have the privilege of serving on the board of trustees for the Washington County Water Conservancy District. And we have a 20-year plan there. And part of that plan includes not only conservation. I mean, as a community, we've replaced over 3 million feet of non-functional turf and made that desert.
Oh, okay.
We've cut back, even despite growing by 17%, we've cut back usage by 9% since 2021. So we're getting the messaging out to reduce demand through conservation. But we're also sourcing water better. It's harder to do. We're maximizing our current reservoirs. We're building new reservoirs, and probably the undertaking of our time. And I would compare this to, like, if you go back to the pioneer heritage in Washington, building the diversion dam on the Virgin River and taking that open ditch canal around Shinnecock and down through those green alfalfa fields where they would flood irrigate. That was an undertaking where they built it literally with shovels and horses and wagons. The undertaking of our time that's going to take us to the next step until we get to the Lake Powell pipeline is a regional reuse system. And that means treating the water, using it, reusing it, reusing it, and reusing it, rather than let it just flow down the Virgin River to the lower basin states. So there is a very well thought out and 20-year plan that is being implemented as we speak, recognizing the dire situation of water. It is the thing that we depend on most for life and livelihood, talking small business.
And fun.
And in times fun, as a secondary priority.
How would that water be reused?
So what happens is when it goes down the drains, it's treated at the St. George facility there. And then what happens is it's treated to a certain level, then it's pumped and stored, and there's an environmental buffer, and then it's treated and redistributed appropriately.
Okay.
And so whether that's a potable use or a secondary use, that is what other desert communities in Phoenix area, in the Las Vegas area, it's what desert communities have to do. And so we refer to it as a regional reuse. And a lot of the work, I mean, it's probably close to $1 billion project over time. But a lot of that just includes pipes that allow us to move water between the local reservoirs. I mean, you take right now, even on this historically low precipitation year, Quell and Sand Hollow are still both at like close to 80%, high 70% full. So we're hoping that remains that way. But when we get the watershed, just to be able to move those, and then certainly some of the smaller reservoirs that are on tap for the west side, the Cheap Toker Reservoir on the east side, and then further down the road, the Warner Valley Reservoir, those will all play a big part of that. But the bigger part is often those underground pipes and the ability to move water that you don't see.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, I mean, knowing some of those water issues that come up, is it hard sometimes when you get these developments that come through and you're like, they're going to be really water intensive, right? They're going to have a lot of usage there, and I've got to balance what the residents need
Yeah.
with this.
So locally, the municipalities that are part of the regional water supply agreement, basically the water district, we've all individually passed landscape conservation ordinances to reduce the amount of grass in yards, because grass, I mean,
Yeah, such a way.
if you pictured like a, a, a square foot of grass, it would go 6 feet deep just to water it annually. So instead of seeing grass as green, sometimes I look at it as blue, because it's just so much water depth that it takes to. So what we're saying is, because more grass on a typical household is used to irrigate your yard than is used for, inside your house for cooking and drinking and bathing and things, we're saying cut back on this non-functional turf. If you're not using the grass for recreation purposes, don't do it. Make your landscape be more of a natural landscape. So new construction that's coming in is meeting a higher standard, which means a lower use of water. And then in some developments, they're even using an ultra efficient water standard in exchange for lower impact fees. So new development is being done differently than old development. Simultaneously, some of these older homes, these generational homes that have large swaths of grass, they're incentivized at $2 per square foot to remove and convert that either to turf or natural scape. So we're kind of hitting it on the front end with tighter restrictions on new builds, and then we're incentivizing and helping older homes to, if they want, to take advantage of some rebates.
Okay. And is that like pretty widely known that there are rebates for that?
I mean, we are preaching it from the rooftops, and there's high demand. Like I say, per capita, we are outpacing the Las Vegas region in landscape conversions.
That's great.
So 3 million square feet around Washington County within just the last few years. That is a lot of grass that has been removed and replaced. And I see it like even just in my neighborhood, going up Green Spring Drive toward the golf course. I see HOAs that have just had grass. Well, they're removing a lot of that grass and replacing it with natural scape. And that doesn't just mean rock. In a lot of cases, it's natural bushes and trees to, kind of keep the ground and the soil somewhat cool.
Yeah.
And the turf has improved so much over the years, because I remember when it was first coming out, it was terrible.
Yeah.
And it's like nobody would do. Hell, there's some, and it can get a little pricey for sure, but it's so much better, and I'm sure that's helping some of the residents say, okay,
You don't have to mow it.
Yeah.
You don't have to fertilize.
it's like I don't have to mow it and water it, because that itself, just the expense of watering, mowing every month, and I'm not doing anything with the grass. And
Yeah.
considered
So
getting mine.
basically, the golf courses are going to become the playgrounds where the kids get to roll around in the grass.
Well,
It's going to be the only grass.
so what we're trying to do though is we're trying to build these. We're not stopping building parks, but we want the community to be out there and gather at those parks, because if you have grass in your front yard, I mean, how much are you really using, or is it just decorative?
Yeah.
And then
Mostly decorative.
the other thing at many of our parks and many of our golf courses and things, now I don't suspect any, or if any, very few future golf courses that come in, but those often are irrigated with secondary water. So it's not the same water you're drinking. And I know that makes it difficult to understand, because we talk about this one water concept, and much water can be treated to a drinkable or potable standard. But some water is just so brackish that, it's not worthless, but it doesn't have the same value for life and livelihood.
So, speaking of the growth and people moving in, one big concern that residents have had is, the cost of housing, and that's both for homeownership as well as people who are renting,
Yeah.
right? So, does the city have any plans or any ideas on, how to help residents with having somewhere to live?
Yeah. So I always like to clarify for just the general public that it is the private sector that builds homes.
Yep.
Because often, and not really intentionally, and obviously not in a vindictive way, but sometimes cities can be an easy target for the city's problem. Where we can influence housing is by removing regulation and red tape, by shortening and making the entitlement process more efficient. We can also be very thoughtful with our general plan, land use designations, and then more specifically as those filter down into the zonings, to where we're able to have smaller lots. So off air, we were talking a little bit about Station Park and some of the things that other communities up north have done. And I was mentioning to you, Danielle, that when we as a council toured some of these other areas, including Farmington, and again, the Station Park is a commercial development, but the principle applies to residential. In some ways, we're rethinking land use in saying that, historically we've looked at dwelling units per acre. Right now, yes, we continue to look at that, and a lot of our code is still based on that, but we're also looking on design and functionality and use over just number of units per acre. So I'll give you an example. Um, just at our meeting this last week, we had a group come in that wanted to develop a relatively small parcel that they originally wanted 14 lots. The plan commission recommended 13. But even still, the general plan said this is R110, which means that you need to make these lots 10,000 square feet or greater. Well, these lots were in the range of 5,000 to 8,000 square feet. They came in asking for a PUD, which we kind of call custom zoning, meaning I'm going to negotiate with the council. We're going to give something in order, to get higher density. Well, we ended up approving 13 lots and cutting out an unnecessary trail and giving them PUD zoning because we recognize that here are 13 individual lots near our beautiful new Wills Park right off George Washington Boulevard where families could actually potentially afford to live here.
Yeah.
And if we held them to that 10,000 square foot requirement, you're cutting down from like 13 lots to 8 lots.
Yeah.
Now I can spread that cost of land over more lots and hopefully reduce that price. Now that's what we're doing. Now builders, developers, are you wanting to just build the McMansions? Or are you wanting to be part of the solution and build houses like maybe you grew up in or your parents grew up in? Because in the past, you've heard me talk about the home that my mother grew up in downtown St. George, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, 5 kids, carport, right? Those are the kind of, I guess what we've got to kind of do in our communities is we've been spoiled. We need to go back to these old-fashioned traditional values and methods that worked. Because if we just build, huge homes on large lots, it doesn't help water, it doesn't help housing attainability, and it really doesn't make for communities that like interact and get along and gather.
Yeah, I agree. One of the things that we had kind of thought, because we are on the, more of the building communities that have higher density. One of the things that we talked about is doing like the tiny homes, like a little tiny home community where you actually like own it, but it has like an HOA to keep it clean and that would make it potentially a lot more affordable for people, but they would like own their home and they would have something that was theirs.
I love that idea. In fact, in my car, I've got a book that's called I forget the whole title, but it talks about what we refer to as the missing middle. So on the one end, you have these apartments, and we have apartments going in Washington along the freeway, along these exits, and then we have these, communities with larger homes. But what we're missing now, certainly there are some townhomes, but what about the condos? What about the fourplexes and the fiveplexes? And so, as we're kind of envisioning a revitalization of our downtown and kind of a live work space, we're also looking at missing middle housing, which in some cases is a fiveplex that looks like one large home, but you have 5 individual units in there, and they're condominiumized to where those who can't afford the big lot and the land and stuff, they can still have an opportunity to have ownership. And so it's similar to those tiny homes. And in initial iterations, we've had some smaller, cottage type homes as part of that. But really, before we get out too front on specifically the downtown area to kind of model it as a city, partnering with developers from the private sector, we want to get public impact input. But we are really looking to find areas to have ownership with smaller homes. And really, in some cases, it's a little bit different of a lifestyle. It might be one car, and you might be commuting to work or something, but maybe that is the way it's going to have to be.
And really quick, I know Christian has something he wants to add, but one of the things I was actually thinking about is what are they called where like they're like the row homes?
Yes.
That would be awesome too. And like going vertical, and not necessarily like as a condo, but as a row house where it's like, 3 stories and squishier so you can fit more.
So I was in Salt Lake City, flew up last week to meet and tour some different developments and meet with some development groups. They're doing this in daybreak. In fact, some of them are like 12 feet wide.
Oh,
But the one that I looked at that really caught my attention for our downtown in Washington is what we refer to as a live work flex space. And so this condo or this town row house, and I'm thinking back to just like what we would see on the Northeast,
right. Yeah.
Georgetown or
Exactly.
Boston or
Yeah.
some of these,
We have none
and
of that.
and some of these bricks. So you can build new, but in the old way, and building in a way where, like even in Europe, where you kind of build this sense of community. But here's what was so unique about these live work spaces, which are part of this missing middle, is it had a rear entry garage on the main level, alley loaded, but on the front, it had around 700 square feet of flex space. So if you wanted to run your small business out of it,
Oh,
if you
that's
wanted to run your
cool.
podcast, if you wanted to have like, a professional office or like a salon or something, you could have that.
Love that.
But then instead of going 3 stories, you go 4.
Yeah.
So on your second level, it's dining and kitchen. Then the next level, your third level is 3 bed, 2 bath, and then the top level is kind of like a living room and then patio area. But
Cool.
it's fantastic and it's really catching on. So to like have been able to tour these and walk
Mhm.
through them, I'm thinking, let's bring these row houses, these buildings to the front on Telegraph and Main. Let's go vertical and let's go back to historic, um, design and uses that really for business. Let's go small.
Yeah.
And let's let them live and work in that
I
same
love
type
that.
of space.
That would be amazing. Yeah.
I think there's some cases where there's a lot of ideas, and even I know several developers, land developers. I know several builders, and there's a lot of them that are really have a good heart and want to do affordable housing and are trying to figure out how do we make it work. And really, the only way that they've found is density. And there's sometimes pushback there as far as density goes, and I get it. There's others who are like, hey, we don't want high density. That might be from residents, that might be coming
Yeah.
from the city level. And I have ownership in a mortgage company, so I kind of see the other side a little bit. And there are, I think those that are pushing against it, just they're not in that situation, right? But there's others that will come to the mortgage company, for example, and they'll have a little bit lower incomes, but they don't want to be in an apartment. They just want to own something, and it could be small, but they want to have something where like this is mine.
Yeah.
Yes.
Their payments are going
Pride of
towards it.
ownership.
They're getting equity. It's like the worst thing is when you're renting and you're like literally just burning money, the worst feeling.
Well, it's interesting because, we had a pretty significant situation like that in our community where we had, actually completely met the code based on the area that was being developed. And the lots were smaller than the adjacent, I think were, closer to, at least a quarter more like 3rd-acre lots. And these were going to be smaller lots. But we had a large part of the community very concerned about it. And they were very vocal in the meetings and by email. And I appreciate that. That's your but the council understanding the need for this ultimately passed the entitlement for it. And what I hope happens is that at the end of the day, that this higher density community with single family lots, with families just trying to get, their feet under them. I look at my kids who are, starting to adult and don't live here right now, and that I want them to be able to come back. They're going to be part of that community. And so I hope that as it starts to build out, the neighbors there will embrace them and recognize that, you know what, I had this fear of what it might have been. And certainly wouldn't we all want to have an alfalfa field next to our home, and the deer coming in the evening. I don't blame them that way. But at some point, the owner of that field was done farming and sold it off. And within the the designations applied for the zoning and was able to get it. And so now we're hoping that we can build those communities and then it's got to be gradual. You can't have these stark differences or these competing things, but if land use is done right, they can be complementary and we can provide those opportunities.
I think a lot of times people think when there's just high density, it's going to increase crime and increase traffic and everything, right? And traffic probably, yes. But I've found that as far as like crime goes, among homeowners, it's low. If people are in there and they have something that they own, it tends to be lower as opposed to if there's a big apartment complex that comes in. That can, that can increase crime. There's still a need for it. But as far as if they have an understanding that, hey, we're going to have higher density here, but everybody's going to be owner, and there's some pride that comes with ownership, and so there tends to be lower crime with that, and people tend to want to take care of their properties a little bit more.
Well, that's exactly the point that you're making, is that ownership. In some cases, if they are rentals and apartments, you do have some increased crime in those particular areas. Great, community focused policing. But I would say, when you're talking about back to that missing middle concept, right? The apartments and to the, big homes and townhomes, what we're missing is some of those like condo missing middle elements. And so the state, the state is really pushing that too. I mean, they've got, I think, $300 million available for condos, but being in the mortgage business, you recognize that even for the developers, condos are hard to get financed from the development level, probably not as much on the individual level, but those are some of the missing middle. And then just the unique way that those those condos are built. They don't have to look like, apartments. They can have some unique character to them, talking about historic East Coast European type feels that bring communities together, and where you actually walk out of your home, whatever that is, and you interact with your neighbors, and you might shop at a little business. You might get a sandwich or, an ice cream or whatever.
Yeah, I think a big challenge that I'm hearing anyways from developers and builders, and I build spec homes as well, so I get it, is just the capital requirements are huge in order to do that, and then getting the construction, the vertical financing can be challenging as well, and it's like all of that adds to the cost, right? If there's a way to shave off everywhere, then it kind of brings things down. But
and I think that's why the state's stepping in with some of that funding for that development of those particular kind of, condo units. The other thing that I would say with our,
like construction, or what are you
like, help with the financing and the funding on the front end from the development, because that is a challenge for those developers, is to get the funding for that. So if they can have some advantaged financing opportunities in order to get it off the ground, then it gets into the private sector. The other thing that I would just touch on too is, and look, we have these great neighborhoods, but as you get into your city centers, in our our commercial neighborhoods and type things, in some ways we're still a little bit too car centered. And so some areas you've got to kind of slow down that traffic and look for more character and more just give people a reason to park the car and walk through the community.
Yeah, that's fair.
I love that.
So, one of the things obviously that's near and dear to my heart is small business. So, Washington City is among the top ranked, in the US for small cities to start a business.
Yeah.
What do you guys do differently? And then what are you going to implement in the future just to make it, advantageous for a small business to come here? And for me, like, because one of the things that I recognize is we have a very unique landscape for small business where it's like this roller coaster ride, because of the heat and tourism.
Yes.
So it might be great to start a business, but like to keep it thriving. Like, what do you guys do in the city to help make that work?
Well, one thing we do is we try to reduce regulation wherever we can. So we want to make it easy to get a business license. We want it easy to get your zoning and your ability to move forward. One thing that we benefit from in those studies, and you're right, we've been the #1 small city in America to start a business. I think it's a mid-size or small city in America to do business 2 of the last 5 years. So we're really proud of that. Some of the benefit that we have is just regionally with, we have access to relatively inexpensive power, and we have, connectivity with roads, and there's just a lot of advantages to doing business here. I think a lot of those are the construction trades. Where we struggle a little bit is in Washington, where we're kind of a young, old city. We don't have these old buildings where kind of mom and pop brick and mortar shops can just, hang a shingle and open up. What we have to do now is, we have to build it. So that makes it a little bit harder for your startup. So right now in kind of our I-15 corridor, where we're seeing a lot of momentum on Green Spring, Main Street, and Washington Parkway exits off I-15, we're seeing more kind of branded franchise. But I do think that as a community, as we develop together that downtown plan, that's where I think that more of the brick and mortar mom and pop might start up. But I think where we're having success is a lot of like construction trades and some of the online businesses and some like the professional trades, real estate, mortgage, etc. So those are thriving and doing well, but we need to continue to create, broaden that ability for them to have a place to, hang a shingle and provide services.
Mhm.
I'd like to chat a little bit more about your downtown plan because I know, I think it's a cool area, and I know there's that kind of an effort to make some changes to the area. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what do you envision
Yeah.
for that area?
So it's been a top priority of mine for the last 4 years as mayor, and it's going to continue for the next 4 years. One of the things, and not to get sentimental, but when we talked at the start a little about this hometown community and the charm, and for generations, Washington was just content to have their, just to be a little suburb of St. George, to have their big lots with their spring water naturally flowing in their gardens in the back, and then south of the river, flood irrigated alfalfa fields. And we were just really content with life, and almost like I wouldn't compare it to the Shire for any Lord of the Rings fans, but it was pretty good in Washington. But what happened is we've been discovered. And so development has just occurred within our boundary. And in order to maintain a high quality of life, we have to have, we've gone from a volunteer fire department to a fully staffed, fire department with 3 stations and more on the way. We've gone from, a kind of a Barney Fife police department to coverage by the sheriff's department, including Sheriff Brooksby when he was the first at the front end of his career, to a fully accredited police department with some 30 some odd officers. So my point in talking about those public safety elements and the other quality of life with your parks and your roads and those other things, my point in saying that is just like in your individual households, municipal governments require revenue in order to pay the bills.
Yes.
And yes, we get some property tax, but property taxes are set so that as the values go up, the rate goes down. So even though things get more expensive, the amount collected remains to the city relatively level or flat. So that becomes, it's already a small portion, probably a third or less of the general fund budget, but it reduces over time, it diminishes. So sales tax becomes, kind of the holy grail of how do we keep high quality of life. So that's why we try to promote things that produce sales tax. Now, did I get too far off the question to get back to the downtown?
No, we're good. We can jump around.
Can we circle this back to the downtown?
We can jump around a little bit because before we do, I think it's important for people to know that commercial and retail stuff drives a lot of that revenue for the city to function. And I was talking to somebody a while ago, I don't remember who, and around Washington, that everybody lives here and then they go to St. George to shop or they go whatever.
Generations. We used to say,
We
go
need
into
that here.
town. Literally.
But we need that here because now we've got so many people moving in, and we need the firefighters, we need the police, we need all of these services, but we need to generate revenue to cover it so that service can.
Christian, you're exactly right. So Washington, we're the second largest city in the county. We're about 17% of the population. St. George is about 3 times our size, so close to 50% of the county's population. But we're not even punching at our weight. The last time that I crunched the numbers, we're only collecting 13% of the countywide sales tax. So we're not even collecting now online shopping that collects sales tax to the ship to destination. That's helping, but we have a 4% gap in just and then where St. George benefits from is that as I recall, they have probably around a 15% or more excess over their 50% population in sales tax revenue that they collect. So my initial goal is to have enough commerce occur within my municipal boundary to at least equal our population proportion. And then at some point, have commerce that draws people from neighboring communities to like punch above our weight a little bit. And so with the Winco, with the Sienna Hills Auto Mall, with the other commerce that's primarily happening along this I-15 corridor, we have got to be able to collect that sales tax revenue in order to pay for those community services. Otherwise, we'll just get behind. So we don't have a choice to make economic development a top priority. Like, not quite up there with water, like we started with, but
Yeah.
maybe a close second.
Yeah. It's necessary for that, for it to function and provide those.
But it's been,
services.
but just like our approach to land use has evolved from design over density, our recognition that we have to evolve with our approach to welcoming new commerce and economic development has done a 180 shift as well. I mean, it used to be like, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you. And so St. George has been great. We will take the business. So since I've been in over the last 4 years, we're saying, well, that has got to change, and we don't have a choice. So now we're playing the balancing act of maintaining this quality community, but also welcoming commerce, and we can talk about the downtown and how that fits, but we can also talk about at some point this massive project called our Southwest Logistics Center down on the south end of our border.
Okay. Let's talk about downtown first, and then I want to get into
Okay, let's do it.
get into that.
Let's do it.
I know you have a vision for downtown, and you guys have been putting in some work
Yeah,
trying to figure out the best use
yeah.
for that space.
So our work has included over the last 4 years assembling 5.39 acres of what was kind of like blighted land. And it's directly at the cross section of, north-south Main Street, east-west Telegraph. And so, it was quite the process to assemble all of those different parcels. And, we have in city government, instead of a savings account, we call it fund balance for our general fund. So we kind of spent down the fund balance. We had a property that we sold to Winco for that, recognizing that that's going to be a good return. But we were able to assemble this property. And then we designed an RFQ/RFP. I know that's kind of funny, weird acronyms, but request for qualifications along with request for proposals to partner with the city to develop this downtown into something that gives us, that's identifiable for Washington.
Can you explain a little more about what those are for people who are watching and may not understand
Yeah.
those?
So what that is we send that out to the development community, and they're going to come back and say, here's our team. Here's our builder. Here's our broker. Here's our finance group. Here's our architect. And then here's what we've done in the past. So we sent that out last spring, and we closed on that. It closed in July. And so I've got 5 proposals that, with my committee, the Economic Development Committee with the city, that we are vetting those. We will soon have those. I anticipate we'll have each of those 5 present to the committee, but we're kind of doing our own due diligence on, kind of like, for lack of a better term, their resumes on deciding who to hire or partner with. But we want to find the group that can really work with us to catch that vision of revitalizing a special downtown with these amazing communities, from Coral Canyon to Green Spring to the Fields and Brio, et cetera. But we need to have the heart of our city, kind of that living room. It's got to be up to that same standard. So we're choosing the partner. And then a critical component is as one that we can work with, one that helps get that design, that live work, that flex design, tie into the character, those historic, old principles done the new way. But then it's critical that it has somebody. I said, this is what I've been telling my staff, and even to the limited conversation I've had with them, I said, this isn't a college exercise to theoretically see what could be done. When we're done with this, we're going vertical. We're designing it to build. So that's why on that RFQ, we said, you need somebody on your finance team that can say, as we go along, this pencils.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, I have 2 council members on this committee. Council, we've got to make sure this is entitled, whether that's form-based zoning or whether we make some other adjustments to our zoning. So we're sitting around the table, public sector, private sector, building this together. And frankly, we might benefit some, but it's really for future generations. So it's and really to rebuild life back into a downtown. I mean, I always believe that, like, cities, organizations, they're like people. They're either growing, evolving, and improving, or they're dying. So when you see an area that just is blighted or that's not keeping up, we have to strengthen that area. And I'm not saying that just because that's getting older and there's just, like, there are great people there, but we just need to infuse some new to it and just help it along again. I hope I'm explaining that right, because I don't want to be targeted for saying that we don't have this amazing downtown community, but over the years, we've had hotels, we've had commerce, we've had stores. They're all gone. So I'm just trying to bring back what has historically been there and bring it back better.
So is it, I know we talked a little bit about Station Park up north where, and for those who don't know, there's kind of some retail or so on the bottom, and then I think
Living.
residential and stuff on
Yes,
the
for
bottom,
sure.
where it's kind of creates a walkable community. It's really cool. And they'll have, music there and stuff. Is it something like that that you're envisioning down there, or,
It absolutely is. It's the live work, it's that flex space, it's that, kind of multi-use, but we're bringing these buildings to the front. We're going vertical, we're going taller. We're gonna reduce our parking requirement, and we might have to find some ways to find other places for them to park. There's going to be some on-street parking necessary. And then if you look at these communities, like I keep going to kind of back east or into Europe, and again, this isn't for the entire city, but this is for kind of that downtown area.
Sure.
Being able to shop small, that really helps. But the other things that you need is you need entertainment, and you need restaurants and some of those things too. So kind of some of the funny things we've done in the meantime is, you remember Nison's hardware store, like the old Quentin Nison's variety store. It was like iconic in Washington, and it was a casualty of UDOT expanding a telegraph, and it was the store where Quentin Nison was. And Bob in the basement could find any piece of hardware that you needed, and people that wanted to quilt had fabric. It was just awesome. And then the other casualty to that was the burger place. Do you remember the red roof
I've heard of it.
burger place where, people would gather for a hamburger and ice cream?
Talks about it.
Both of these were casualties of just thinking that the road was more important than the character. So if I'm passionate, it's because part of my youth, when we were 4,000 people instead of 40, was shopping at the old hardware store
Yeah.
and eating at the burger place. So now we got to recreate, we've got to build it back, and it's a challenge to do. So we're trying to bring those pieces together. But what we've done in the meantime is where that hardware store and where Quentin and Gwendolyn Nison's home was, we've actually opened it up to a temporary food truck park.
Okay.
And we're getting a lot of traffic there. And now you're going to see, starting in September, at Veterans Park, which we've done the whole remodel for the old gym. It's now Heritage Hall. We've improved that space, kind of that northwest east corner. It's looking really good. But we're also bringing in a farmer's market down there.
Oh, cool.
So we've partnered with a group that's already relatively established, who reached out to us. So if we can start to bring people downtown, then that starts to spark the interest in the activity.
I like that. If you're working with the private sectors, I think what a lot of people need to realize is that the city just doesn't start businesses, people do.
Right.
But the city can either incentivize or create that environment where somebody feels comfortable. Like,
Exactly.
okay, I'm going to take a risk and I'm going to open a burger joint.
Exactly.
Right? They've got to feel comfortable in that, and feel like they've got a good shot at succeeding. Because otherwise, they might lose everything if they.
Yeah, they're the ones with the skin in the game.
Yeah. So I like that you're
spot on.
You're aware of that there. So,
and it's going to be awesome. Like
Sounds like.
This process, watch it unfold over the next few years. And this is going to be community built. We are going to include residents and get their feedback, and we're going to incorporate that into this design.
when it comes to just to switch it up just a little bit here. So, sometimes in the position here, you've got to make really difficult decisions, right? And so how do you balance, like, sometimes you might have something that's maybe you've got to weigh what's might be unpopular with people compared to what you truly feel is best for the city, right? How do you balance that? How do you make those?
My council is actually better at it than I am. So I was on the council for 6 years before.
Okay.
I was on the council. And in the public service sector, when there's a controversial item, often land use, often fear of the unknown, fear of change, residents will come and express their concern. Higher crime, more traffic, more density. Like, they have concerns because it changes, kind of the lifestyle they're used to. That public clamor always made me so uncomfortable. And we still have that, but I am blessed and really fortunate to have a really strong, experienced, and thoughtful, informed city council. And so we've had several occasions where we've had the public come and push back on things. And despite that, despite knowing that these are the residents that vote for us to be in here, my council has made the hard but right decision. And I can tell you that almost in every single case, when that project is done, those residents that were pushing back on it really loved it. On a smaller scale, um, when I had the idea to use RAP funding, Recreation Arts and Park funding, to revitalize the back of the sandstone old school to make a gathering place into the old gym and turning into the Heritage Hall, which is amazing. You need to come tour it sometime.
Yeah.
I had some pushback from old timers who didn't want the change. But as I pushed forward with that, and it couldn't have gone better. So sometimes I think in public service, it's more risky not to to be forward thinking and take the calculated chance
Mhm.
than it is to stay where it's comfortable.
Mhm.
So we have to take those risks and move forward. And that's what we're doing with the downtown too. I mean, there's a lot of risk. I could have people hate me for what this goes. So that's I think where my counsel is. And I tell my counsel this too. I say, look, it took me a minute to, change hats from that elected role to the mayoral elected role. And I say, I used to lose sleep over votes. I said, I still lose sleep, but over so many more things now than I did. It's just such a different vantage point being in the mayor's seat, the executive branch versus the legislative.
Mhm. Speaking of that, I mean, there comes in that position, there comes some challenges in that, you're gonna be loved by some, you're gonna be hated,
Yes.
like, regardless of what you do. That's
Yes.
my perspective anyways, right? I've never held anything. But what would you say, what's your why for doing that? I think
Yeah.
people have to have a strong why for, like, dealing with
Yeah.
that stuff, right? What's your why?
So I don't want to get too sentimental, but I might just a little bit. So
It's okay, we've had a few people cry on here.
I'm not much of a crier, but let me tell you why.
okay.
And we'll start with this. I was literally raised by this community, by the Washington community. And let me explain that. So I am the youngest of four boys. My closest brother is 13 years older.
Wow.
So I was surprised very later in life. And so um, my father actually passed away when I was 11, and my mother really struggled with that. But I had this great family network and I had this great community network. And so I literally just was raised by this community. And at some point, it wasn't like a light going off, but it was kind of like the sun rising, where it kind of just said, it's time to give back to this community. So I think I'm really uniquely positioned to, help kind of bridge that gap. And I'm really motivated because, I mean, think about how much you love those who have given you opportunity or giving you support over your lifetime. For me, it was this entire community that like loved me and gave me that support. So I have a real deep, like ingrained desire to support it. And I'm not perfect, but I think people recognize that even if you're not perfect, you're genuine with your intention, and they can give you some grace if you make mistakes. And also, um, I spent 2 years in France on a mission. I'm used to rejection. I'm used to opposition.
You can't
So
be
I'm
afraid of it.
okay to have some pushback, and I don't mind that. I still just, kind of move, and I'm confident enough to know that I think we're moving in the right direction. And then also, like the biggest thing too is do it as a we. Do it with your council, do it with your city manager and your department heads. And if you do it collectively as a group, recognizing that I have this role, letting them do their roles, that's a recipe. And from my limited experience so far, we'll see how it goes, 4 years from now. But so far, that's been a recipe for success. Is like the we versus the me. Like it's not about my ego. It's about what are we doing for this community.
Love it. So if we fast forward talking about that 4 years from now, if we fast forward that 4 years from now, how would you know, or what would have happened for you to look back at this 4 years and say, okay, we had success?
Yeah.
What would that look like?
Yeah. So certainly the downtown, making significant progress on the downtown. And that's hard because there are a lot of variables that could that could thwart that. But that has been something that's been on my mind for years. Another kind of fun thing that's been on my mind that we're making quicker progress than I thought is I like the outdoor active, lifestyle that we have in the recreation. We're working on the historic canal trail.
Hmm.
So north of the river, we have a lot of parks and open spaces, places to recreate. But south of the river, where the Washington Fields, where a lot of these communities are building out, we're lacking. So the Wills Park is exciting. It's this 14-acre Wills Park, and it's more than just a pump track and skate park and stuff.
Oh, it looks amazing.
It's so cool, isn't it?
Yeah, I'm like, "Ooh, what are they doing there?"
Yeah.
But I'm trying to connect communities. You've heard me talk about the Open Ditch Canal. So that was piped about 20 years ago. And there's an easement to maintain that if they ever have to fix the pipe. So on top of that, we collectively as a city, we're working to obtain easements and build a trail system along the top of that that would go from Schnabkai, the Virgin
Yeah.
River, all the way down to Crimson Cliffs High School, which is within our
yeah.
city, and tie into the rest of the kind of the regional
Oh, cool.
trail network. But what I look at is like the Wills Park, our really cool Sullivan Soccer Park, and these other parks, Shooting Star, etc. And I got this idea when we were in Australia a few years ago at Brisbane. But I look at these parks, these regional parks, as hubs. These hubs where communities get together and recreate and enjoy themselves. But then the spokes off these hubs are the trail systems.
Mm.
So regardless of your stage in life, from the young to the old, at any time of day, you can now access these recreation places, including splash pads, Danielle, including splash pads by trail. But what you also do in more of a car-centered community, you're also connecting neighborhoods and people.
Yeah.
And so sometimes people get a little worried about trails, but it just opens up the community, allows people to interact, and we need that social. I mean, just think about COVID when it was shut down.
Yeah.
People getting out on the trails in the parks, interacting, and that's what we're seeing. So I was really excited that we were able to approve a bid for another 1.5 miles of canal trail. We acquired dozens and dozens of easement just to piecemeal this together, and we keep making progress. So the historic canal trail is another real critical component, for like visible success
I love that.
4 years from now.
Yeah.
That is awesome. All right. Well, there you have it. We've got Mayor Staheli. I appreciate you.
Are we done already?
We should get it started. We've been at an hour. We could probably talk forever.
You'll have to have me back
But
sometime.
we will, yes. So, but no, I appreciate you coming on. I mean, that was great. I think we learned a lot. So thank you for
It's
listening.
been my pleasure. It's good to get to know you both better and interact with you as well.